Hi everyone, Susthany Spence Tano here, keeping you waiting for a little bit for this new Jenny Death review.
Review it now! Review the album!
You know, you've been waiting for this album for like 8 months. You can wait like a couple of days for this review.
Review the dang album, Anthony! Jenny Death 10!
God damn it! Death Grips is a Sacramento-based experimental hip-hop trio consisting of producer, Flatlander, percussionist, producer, songwriter, Zach Hill, and MC Ride, vocalist. Crazy man. They've been turning the underground on its head since the release of 2011's Ex-Military, their debut mixtape, which delivered noisy, visceral, industrial hip-hop with a punk ethos. And even though Death Grips came through with this incredibly aggressive and unwavering, uncompromising sound, they actually went on to find quite a bit of diversity in their style with subsequent albums like the very catchy and I think their poppiest album, my favorite album in their discography, The Money Store, the incredibly electronic No Love Deep Web, the sort of odd and short and very instrumental Government Plates. They also had that instrumental album that dropped in the midst of the 2 discs of this new double LP, The Powers That Be, the first disc of which came out last year and was definitely Death Grips' most abstract set of tracks yet, loaded with dizzying rhythms, Bjork vocal samples, songs that had really unusual structures to them, yet all the tracks segued into one another, making the entire LP feel like one cohesive piece. And this record wasn't a bad listen, but since it was announced as the first half of a double album, Death Grips essentially kept fans waiting like, almost a year for the second half of this double LP.
Jenny Death when?
Has essentially been the rallying cry of nail-biting fans all throughout 2014. Fans that might not be 100% aware of the BDSM-style relationship Death Grips has with its listeners and the music industry in general. Death Grips does give its listeners pleasure through explosive, genre-defying music, but there's also disappointment and tension-building and thirst-building that Death Grips actively engages in with their fans and the music industry through canceled shows, the way that they interact with their fans and the industry so elusively and standoffishly through social media and message boards, leaking the No Love Deep Web album, which got them dropped from Epic Records, also putting a penis on that album cover, making fans wait this long for Jenny Death, the sudden breakup they announced scrawled out on a napkin, although just recently on Facebook they said that they might make more. More what? I don't know. And the fact that they just said, we might, because just breaking up and staying broken up is just far too defined a decision for Death Grips, just always wanting to keep people just on the edge of their seats. However, we are right now at a point of release because the second half of The Powers That Be has been dropped, Jenny Death, which has a very different feel to its sister album that I will sort of go back to and talk a little bit about toward the end of this review. But as far as Jenny Death goes, for a record that has been anticipated for as long as Jenny Death has, it does a pretty decent job of living up to the hype. There are no Bjork samples on this record, and Death Grips essentially is back to their incredibly hard-hitting selves with a series of very succinct songs that work better as, singles, individual tracks than they do as a holistic piece. Death Grips comes through with a load of crushing, powerful choruses on this record, and for the first time, Death Grips is not only embodying that punk attitude with just that really confrontational outward appearance, but they're actually embodying punk music in sound as well on this project by bringing quite a bit of original guitars into the mix. There's a good chunk of songs on this album that feature some prominent guitars that are kind of brittle in tone. Some of the riffs are a little hardcore inspired. Jenny Death is one of Death Grips' catchiest, most upfront, and sonically potent records yet. And it all kicks off with the song I Break Mirrors with My Face in the United States. Wonderful title. And this track feels like just a speedy, bustling, hard-hitting piece of cyberpunk, like Atari Teenage Riot inspired. There's some very nutty and just very textured percussion in the background, wailing tones, and over it, Stefan, MC Ride, is just yelling manically, I break mirrors with my face in the United States, break mirrors with my face in the United States. I don't care about real life. Death Grips is one of the few bands out there to embrace the digital age with such an incredible amount of grit. And the way I interpret this track is that we have Death Grips smashing mirrors, reflections of reality, and sort of pulling their listeners into the internet, because the internet is kind of Death Grips' den of horrors. Now, I'm not going to say this track is amazing songwriting-wise, but lyrically and sonically, it is a fantastic start to this record, and it is a fantastic manifesto for Jenny Death. We glide from this track into Inanimate Sensation, which in my track review for that track, I talked about how this song was sort of about fake digital feelings. Again, we have Death Grips here kind of rejecting reality, talking about later in this track how Stefan likes his iPod more than fucking. There are also nods to rock machismo at some points of this track. And with the kind of romping drum beat on this song and the constantly escalating electronic sounds in the background that are very textured, kind of distorted, along with the screaming vocals just all at once. These constantly revving sounds is just another example of Death Grips with each record, always trying something new, always onto something different, finding another way to make something completely whacked out and also blood pumping. And when the lyrics initially kick in on this track, it's like the band has just reached through the speakers, run their fist into my ear canal and just kind of swishing my brain around and beating it until it's a lump of goop. And this might kind of go unnoticed because of how electrifying and aggressive this song is, but with this track's multiple parts, the really great refrain, "Pull out!" and the intense finish, how each part of this song has a different kind of feel to it. Death Grips really are pretty skilled songwriters. Now, with the song turned off, we actually have the guitars kind of taking over for a little bit. These just burnt, brittle guitars. The chorus is incredibly hard-hitting, has this hardcore-inspired riff, but it's also very psychedelic with Stefan's vocals kind of soaked in echo. This track and many other songs on this record are really overwhelming. There's a lot of layers of different sounds all together, but it doesn't stop Death Grips from having a lot of punch. There are spots where I felt like the guitars and the drums could have been a little bit more defined. Maybe they sort of just muddy each other a little bit. It also feels like there's a bit of an electronic buzz running throughout some parts of this track too. But MC Ride's vocals just really pop out of this track, delivering some of his most insane lyrics yet, talking about that he's been spinning chambers since he was a little kid, that he smokes cigarettes in the shower, when they get wet he lights another, that he prefers a cardiac attack over cancer to just sort of, just have a quick death. There are actually a lot of references to death and suicide on this record, which, given the title, Jenny Death, it's not really that surprising. And it is a Death Grips record too. And it's also worth noting that as far as the energy behind Stefan's performance on this track, it's pretty immense at times, especially when he just sort of squelches out from his vocal cords, "Mommy!" Moving on from here, we have Why a Bitch Gotta Lie, which kind of continues that cyberpunk aesthetic that the first track kicked off with. But it kind of takes it a step further with this oddly danceable beat on the chorus and some vocal effects that feel kind of vocoder-esque. It definitely results in this really unreadable and very loud and in-your-face robot voice throughout much of this song, which kind of kills interpreting these lyrics without going out and reading them, but it actually adds a really interesting sonic texture for this track that really makes it stick out. We also have him on this song and others here too, laughing very menacingly to the point where it is very creepy. And there are moments in the lyrics here where Death Grips, I think, are kind of tooting their own horn a little bit, getting kind of braggadocious, saying, "Try and tame me," and sort of putting forward this idea that Death Grips is kind of animalistic and limitless. Again, we kind of have these heavy, hardcore riffs on the chorus here, and I just feel like I'm listening to so many genres of music crash together at once. Hip-hop and punk music and electronic music and psychedelic music as well, yet they're all working together so cohesively. Death Grips continues to be this mind-blowing Frankenstein monster of different musical genres, and that is only highlighted even further with the next track, Pss Pss, which is an oddly danceable and maybe even twerk worthy bit of kind of off-kilter hip-hop. It's really messed up the way this track sounds. It's kind of groovy, but also like mutant-like. And lyrically, we actually get a few references to tracks off of the first half of the songs Fuck Me Out and Have a Sad Come. In a way, I think the chorus here kind of highlights the cheapness of sex and maybe brings a little bit of context to Have a Sad Come. But there's also kind of this demented edge to this track too, making reference to pissing on someone's face in the chorus. Pss, pss. And the title track of this record, I will leave it simply by saying this is Death Grip's loudest song, period. It's just so freaking blown out! And this burst of volume is only emphasized by Ride's lyrics right beforehand saying, I can't know what I'm about to do! And some of the lyrics toward the back end of this track actually signal to me really what Death Grips has been about all along, philosophically, aesthetically, comparing, I guess, their competition to like a sterilized white flag. I've never heard Death Grips gloat so much on a record, but with how hard-hitting Jenny Death is, they have quite a bit of reason to gloat, I think, because they definitely do make a lot of really abrasive music, and just even normal, regular, everyday music seem very, I guess, really wimpy and measly and maybe even inauthentic, even though to an extent I'm sure what Death Grips delivers to us time and time again on each album is an act, it is a stage show, it is a performance, but there's something just really real and tangible about it too, tangible about the aggression and the extremity of it. Now sadly, the record actually goes into what I think is my least favorite track in the track listing here, Beyond Alive, where I actually find the guitar parts of this track to be kind of weak. This album to me is a lot like the first half of The Powers That Be, in that we kind of have this sort of one instrument or sound that is a bit of a recurring theme on a lot of the tracks. There it was Bjork's voice. Here it is this guitar, and a lot like with the inclusion of Bjork's vocals, this guitar's inclusion isn't always fantastic. The diddling theme melody that pops up again and again gets a little stale, and while I don't mind the distorted fight riff that builds up to the chorus and the hard-hitting chorus as well, but as soon as the distortion gets sucked out of the guitars and we're kind of getting these, watery, kind of slinky guitar chords that are pretty mild and mid-paced, the guitars really lose a lot of flavor and energy for me. And despite the really anthemic string-like melody on the track Centuries of Damned, as well as some really immense lyrics too, this track is not really without its blemishes as well, with some very kind of apathetically droning, loud, blaring guitar chords that, just two chords kind of switching back and forth that don't really bring much, if anything, to the song. The track really could have done without them. However, these guitars really make a comeback on the track On GP, which is another track from this track listing here that I did an individual track review for. I said was Death Grip's most depressing track, suicidally themed, and in a way kind of ballad-like, maybe even the closest to a ballad Death Grips will ever get. There's a really fantastic lead guitar melody on this track that, again, I will say is very hard rock influence, maybe even just a little Led Zeppelin-esque. Some chilling organs on this track too, and some amazing and almost frightening lyrics delivered by Stefan during the more toned down moments of this song. The track sounds better in the track listing here than it did by itself, but the entire record actually finishes off with this really weird, nutty, kind of industrial, somewhat techno-influenced instrumental Death Grips 2.0, which isn't really that satisfying of a closing to this album. I think On GP would have made for a better finish, but still, I think Death Grips 2.0 is more of a message than it is a song for a few different reasons. One, this track kind of sounds like what could be the background music for some kind of fantastic bit of film at the end of a really great movie, sort of showing, aha, the bad guy, the monster, he's not dead, he's back, and then some crazy to be continued sign flashes in front of the audience's eyes saying, oh, there's going to be more on the way. The music really has that kind of tone to it. There's also the fact that the ending is so abrupt, and this track overall does kind of feel like a cliffhanger. And just to think about the title of this track too, Death Grips 2.0. Are they saying that this album was Death Grips 2.0? Maybe, but the way that I read it is that Death Grips 2.0 is on the way. Now, as far as the first half of the powers that be, I'm not going to get too deep into it. If you really want to know some more defined thoughts on each individual track, I recommend checking out my older review of that record. I will drop a link in the description box, and there will also be a link at the end of this video too. I still think it's a great project, which I was kind of afraid to put a score on and have too many definitive thoughts about until I had heard Jenny Death. And I will say, even though I do enjoy it, I don't think Jenny Death is really making me rethink it at all. Outside of a few tracks that are blatantly referenced on Ps. To me, really, these are two very different albums. I mean, Jenny Death has some very bold, upfront, and in-your-face themes and concepts going on in the lyrics, dealing with the digital world and death. These two records flow very differently. They're two very different lengths as well. They're aesthetically different. They take two very different approaches to song structuring as well. One album of tracks being very abstract and obtuse and difficult to make sense of. The other having very defined verses and choruses, a lot of the tracks being incredibly catchy and visceral. These two albums only feel like a double album in the fact that they've been billed as a double album. I really don't think these two albums enhance one another, at least not in any kind of traditional way. Maybe in a sense they highlight and make very apparent their differences. And maybe in the world of Death Grips, that's exactly what makes them perfect sister albums. You have Death Grips' most ambiguous release stapled to one of their most records yet, both coming together for over 80 minutes of mind-bending insanity. And maybe separating these two albums wasn't the worst thing in the world, because with this album being so difficult, maybe it did take a little bit more time to digest. Kind of wrestle with this album, make heads or tails of it, and also come to appreciate how uninterpretable this album is and how absurd some of the parts of this record are, especially the end of VOILA and Big Dipper and Fuck Me Out. Still though, I don't think this record is without its potholes. The Bjork samples do get a little incessant, and I still do think the start of Black Quarterback is unnecessarily cluttered. I think these two records actually end up adding up to one of the most impressive records in Death Grips' discography so far. I'm feeling a light to decent 9 on the powers that be.
Transition, tell me what you think about this album. Did you like the shit? Did you hate the shit? And why do you like or hate said shit? And what should Anthony review next? Because he doesn't fucking know half the goddamn time. I don't even know what I'm doing half the goddamn time. I go by the name of the Granddad of Granddad Wooly, super dope hip-hop MC, and host of the hilarious but very informative review show Wooly Reviews here on YouTube.com. You can hear and see all that beautiful shit on my channel, Granddad RDLR. Look that shit up. Before you do that though, make sure you subscribe to the homie Anthony's channel, The Needle Drop. Check out more videos, and when you're done getting your fill of Fantano, holla at your boy Granddada and get you some Wooly Reviews and some dope hip-hop on top of that shit. So signing off for the homie and myself, until next time we take our leave, Granddada, Anthony Fantano, forever.